we are recording.
Thank you. Buenas tardes and good afternoon. This is a meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, Boulder County, and today is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022, and we are here for a public hearing. And before we start that, just a reminder for folks that you can always call in to confirm an item of interest at 303-441-3500. We do have an ADA coordinator for folks who are wanting to participate in public hearings and meetings at the Commissioner's office and or virtually. The ADA coordinator can be reached at 303-441-3525. And the agendas can be found at bocc.org/BOCC-agendas. And with that, the packet that we're going to be working with tonight starts on page 578 of today's packet and agenda. And so with that, we will see here. I'm just scrolling through the agenda. So we go to our public hearing. We're here this evening, item 11A on Commissioner's Office, American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, final recommendations. And we are going to ask, as was stated before we started and went live, just for the process here, we have a presentation from the community working groups, partners who've been working on the American Rescue Plan Act funding. And then we will open up for public comments. There will be an opportunity, and we'll talk about the instructions for that, for folks to move into panelists and speak and or to telephone in. And then commissioners will have an opportunity to ask any questions or to respond to any of that feedback. There will not be a decision made this evening, so there isn't a vote as much as just to receive the information from our partner agency, Rebuild by Design, and the working partners that have been working on the American Rescue Plan Act. For folks who are needing to call in, either now, any tech issues, etc., the call-in number is 1-833-568-8864. And we'll give instructions for anybody who needs to phone in to give public comment as well at that time. The attendee link for this particular hearing, is boco.org/BOCC-ARPA-hearing. So with that, we will turn it over to Amy Chester with Rebuild by Design for your group's presentation. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Loachman, Commissioner Jones, and Commissioner Levy, county staff, and members of the public. On behalf of the Boulder County ARPA Steering Committee, who represent over 200 organizations in Boulder County, we thank you for having us here today. I'm Amy Chester, the Director of Rebuild by Design. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic has touched all members of the Boulder County community, in some cases very tragically. And though the pandemic's efforts have been widespread, the health and economic impacts have not fallen equally among different communities. The pandemic further exposed historical inequities and disparities in health and economic outcomes by race, ethnicity, age, gender, geography, physical ability, sexual orientation, and other factors. Last summer, Rebuild by Design worked with the Boulder County Commissioners and the Community Foundation for Boulder County to launch an initiative to ensure that the greatest impacted community members are prioritized in the recovery. This means the disproportionate burdens we experienced during the pandemic would be the focus of new county programs or increased support for existing programs to create long-term impacts to the people who need it the most. Before we begin, I'll turn it over to Tatiana Hernandez, representing the Community Foundation.
Speak a little bit slower. Ma'am, could you speak a little bit slower for the interpreters? Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Sorry about that. Before we begin, I'll turn it over to Tatiana Hernandez, representing the Community Foundation for Boulder County, who has been a tremendous advocate for this effort, to say a few words.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, commissioners. This pandemic exposed some of the starkest inequalities in our community. Throughout the pandemic, the Community Foundation has worked closely with our nonprofit and government partners to ensure support was available to those who needed most. Through our COVID-19 fund, the foundation distributed over $1.9 million to meet our community's needs. In many ways, our partnership with the county on this work started when we worked together through our Funders Collaborative to augment and support our community collectively. I want to thank county leadership and staff for our continued partnership on this and many other bodies of work in our community. The results you will see today represent a new way of doing business. Community leaders came together to work with the county to design programs that the community asked for. Today's meeting will focus on the outcome of the process and the working group's recommendations that we hope will drive transformative change in our community. It is also our hope that every lesson learned throughout this process will inform the implementation of these ideas and other key decisions the county will make moving forward. After today's recommendations, we hope the county's relationship with the community will continue to grow after you make your final decisions. I want to recognize Boulder County leaders, Commissioners Loachman, Levy, and Jones, and the Boulder County staff for listening to the community in phase 1 and creating a truly transparent process and helping to direct ARPA funds. Finally, an enormous thank you to all the community leaders and community members who dedicated so many hours to develop these truly meaningful recommendations. I turn it back to Amy.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. Next slide. We'll kick off the presentation with a short synopsis of the collective process we took to reach a decision on these recommendations, followed by presentations on the transformative programs recommended by the 3 working groups. They are economic challenges, affordable housing, and mental health and social resilience. Next slide. The process was designed by Boulder County's ARPA Steering Committee and coordinated by Rebuild by Design with the support of county staff. ARPA stands for the American Rescue Plan Act, also known as the federal funding to help communities build back from the pandemic. The county invited organizations who reflect the diversity of the communities affected by COVID and with strong grassroots foundation to become members of this committee. The partners are listed on this slide and here with us this afternoon. Boulder County was committed to understanding how they can address the effects of COVID on the entire community and how to build assets, strength, and resilience to address the disparities that have become apparent during the pandemic and provide measurable and equitable outcomes. These partners were invited into the process because they know best how to engage with their communities.
Excuse me, the interpreters are asking for us to slow down just a little bit again.
Thank you. These partners were invited into the process because they know best how to engage their communities, and they have provided crucial insight and value throughout this process. The goals created by the steering committee for this effort are as follows: to ensure that the disproportionate effects of COVID on certain communities are mitigated for the future by building assets, strength, and resilience, to provide robust opportunities for community engagement around the distribution of ARPA funds, to promote an exclusive government process, to understand residents' experience, to inform long-term planning for Boulder County, and to be transparent, equitable, and inclusive. I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Joanna Lawton, to take you through the process.
Thank you so much, Amy, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. So we kicked off this process last summer with a widespread community engagement effort that was led by our partners and the county community engagement team. And the goal was to understand how residents, business owners, students, and workers all across Boulder County were impacted by the pandemic, as well as to collect their ideas for building an inclusive recovery throughout the county. Due to the unpredictable circumstances brought on by the pandemic, we designed an outreach process that relied on a survey and virtual and in-person community feedback events and created outreach materials that were then translated into Spanish and Nepalese. And all the hard work by our partners paid off. We actually surpassed our goal of over 1,500 surveys, and we attended or organized over 41 events through connections with over 300 organizations and talking to folks on the street. And I would like to quickly acknowledge, in addition to the efforts of our partners, Aisa Garita and Ignacio Barunda from the county staff, put in amazing effort to reach folks where they were, at community centers, at churches, family resource centers, at farmers markets, and the list goes on. And so the feedback from the community gave us a very clear direction for phase 2. Among the many challenges that were brought on or magnified by the pandemic, the areas of greatest need existed at the intersection of economic challenges, housing affordability, and mental health and social resilience. But we also heard that addressing distrust in government through transparency and demonstrating that the community's feedback really matters would be an essential part of the recovery process. So, building on the ideas brought forward in that community engagement effort, the ARPA Steering Committee co-designed a second phase of this work to design recommendations for the use of the ARPA funds. We established 3 working groups, which for the first time were co-led by community leaders and a Boulder County agency head. The selection process for these groups entailed a call for applications to over 300 organizations across the county. 35 community members were selected through a collaborative process with community leaders and county agency heads to participate, all whom brought together diverse perspectives to this process through their lived, professional, academic, and volunteer experiences to reflect the diversity across Boulder County, across racial, ethnic, geographic, gender, sexual orientation lines. And together, with the input of the Boulder County Commissioners, we collectively identified a set of criteria for these recommendations. They must be transformational, balance the needs of the long-term and the short-term, must be easily deployed to help people in immediate need. They must be sustainable when the ARPA funding runs out. They must focus on equity and addressing the underlying racial, economic, and health disparities in the county. They must leverage the completed plans and research that already exists in the county. And they must be groundbreaking, something that the government would not traditionally do without all this input. So I will now hand it over to Rebecca Novinger, who will present the first proposal from the working groups.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Novinger, and I'm the Executive Director and CEO of Imagine, a nonprofit organization that provides support for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'm also the Vice President of Human Services Alliance, and we are made up of over 60 local human services organizations providing critical services to thousands of Boulder County residents. I'm so pleased tonight to be presenting to all of you. It was my honor to serve as co-chair of the Economic Challenges Committee, along with Susan Caskey, Interim Director of the Boulder County Housing and Human Services Department. Commissioner Lokerman was our commissioner sponsor. Next slide, please. The Economic Challenges Committee was made up of 19 community leaders of nonprofit and from the nonprofit and small business community. We had an incredible team of passionate and engaged individuals who threw themselves into the work of identifying the nuances of the challenges and developing smart recommendations. After several initial meetings, the Economic Challenges Work Group gathered and decided to focus on 2 major themes: small businesses and nonprofit sustainability and childcare. Next slide, please. Within those 2 themes, 3 recommendations emerged, which we are pleased to present to you this evening. The first recommendation is Survive and Thrive, which focuses on nonprofits in the small business community. And the second 2, Direct Cash Assistance to Families and Early Childhood Community Village, are focused on childcare. And with that, I'll turn it over to Miranda. Next slide, please.
Oh, good afternoon. Miranda Fisher. I'm the town administrator for the town of Nederland. And as Rebecca noted, our first proposal is called Survive and Thrive. What we are requesting is $7.5 million to provide grants to small businesses, nonprofit organizations, and business support entities. Our proposal is broken into 2 areas of focus. Under the Survive component, Grants would provide support to some meaningful support to short and long-term investments that will stabilize business conditions, workforce, and operations. Under the Thrive component, grant awardees would be required to engage with entities that provide business support services. Those entities that provide those direct business support services will also be eligible for grants that allow for both the expansion of current services and the creation of new innovative offerings that can best assist the business community. We would be looking to launch the RFP process and begin collecting applications in early 2023, with the goal of awarding businesses in the summer of 2023. We feel that this proposal impacts businesses in the following ways. It ensures business continuity for small businesses and nonprofit organizations that are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 and can demonstrate a negative economic impact. We'll also increase capacity for building business support entities. It will motivate businesses, support entities to develop new and innovative offerings. And it will ensure higher participation rates of small businesses and nonprofit organizations in available business support programs. Next slide, please. Our target populations include the following: small businesses located or serving in qualified census tract areas, high vulnerability index areas, and remote communities. We will also be focusing on small business owners with low or moderate income and economically distressed areas, those that have low or moderate personal wealth based on household net worth, and or have diminished opportunities to access capital or credit. We will also target nonprofit organizations serving communities hit hardest by COVID-19 pandemic, including people with disabilities, people of color, family with low to medium incomes, immigrants and refugees, LGBTQ, young children, and older adults. And I will now turn it over to Jessica Erickson.
Thanks, Miranda, and thank you, commissioners, for your time this afternoon. My name is Jessica Erickson. I am President and CEO of Longmont Economic Development Partnership. The next thing that we're going to talk about is some recommendations that our working group developed around possible criteria for grant awardees in the three categories: small businesses, nonprofit organizations, and business support entities. We've also developed a recommendation for the distribution of funds across those three different categories. In the small business grant category, we're suggesting 400 awardees at $10,000 per business, or $4 million in total funding. Some potential criteria for grantee selection would be serving or located in a qualifying census tract, a high-risk vulnerability index, or remote community. Businesses that can demonstrate negative economic impact from the pandemic and are also providing quality jobs that pay a living wage, health benefits, and flexibility. That they're currently or committed to participating in Boulder County business resource programs, and that they have a commitment to diversity and inclusion in the workplace, that they use local supply chain when possible, and demonstrate a commitment to environmental sustainability. For nonprofit organizations, we're suggesting 40 awardees at $50,000 per organization, $2 million in total funding, with some possible criteria for award being serving COVID impacted populations, demonstrating negative economic impact from the pandemic, a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and demonstration of investment priority for low wage workers. And finally, for business support entities, we're suggesting 15 awards at $100,000 per award for total funding of $1.5 million in that category. Some potential criteria for those awards would be serving COVID impacted populations, commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, demonstration of investment priority for traditionally underserved small business owners and entrepreneurs, and that the organizations themselves are community-based. Next slide, please. The Survive and Thrive program would be a new grant program seeking to address both short-term need while also providing long-term support. It will do this by supporting eligible small businesses and nonprofit organizations that can make meaningful short and long-term investments to stabilize their own business conditions, workforce, and operations. That's the survive part of the program. The thrive part of the program is that we would require awarded businesses and nonprofits to engage with a variety of entities that provide business support services, such as the Small Business Development Center or Workforce Boulder County. We also believe the program expands the capacity of those helps to expand the capacity of those business support organizations to offer services, as well as to create new innovative offerings to support local businesses above and beyond current and traditional government programs to increase their impact. We also think that by supporting small businesses that are non or underbanked through this program, we are both meeting an immediate need for those small businesses, as well as providing assistance so that they may qualify for traditional resource programs in the future. Examples of similar programs, both locally and throughout the country, are the existing CAT PI program through the SBDC, the Denver Business Impact Opportunity Fund that provides funding to small businesses in impacted areas. And then nationally, in both Indiana and Maine, we found examples of programs that were investing both directly in small businesses as well as the resource infrastructure to serve them. With that, I will turn it over to Hayden Dansky.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hayden Dansky. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I'm the Executive Director of Boulder Food Rescue, a community-led food access organization. As has been mentioned before, this proposal supports small businesses that are hardest hit by the pandemic. Those are located or serving or located in a high-risk vulnerability index area or a remote community that is defined by socioeconomic status, household composition and disability, and housing type and transportation. It also supports nonprofit organizations that directly serve communities hardest hit by the pandemic, such as people with disabilities, older adults, communities of color, LGBTQ people, and other marginalized populations. But furthermore, it also addresses internal equity within organizations and businesses by allowing organization proposals to demonstrate this investment priority of really addressing equity internally. And some of the ways that those could be used are things like wage equity, increasing pay for our lower wage workers, hiring underrepresented community members or program participants, supporting professional development to promote real career advancement for individuals, language translation and interpretation and cultural broker services, expanding legal resources for immigrants and our undocumented community members, technical assistance for historically underserved entrepreneurs, and physical storefront upgrades. Next slide. So in order to implement this proposal, we are asking for a few things. One is the development of this competitive grant and RFP process. Second is that we'd like to see a creation and appointment of a selection committee that has completed a rigorous equity training. And what this would do is further democratize the decision-making process and allow more community voice to have a seat at the table when it comes to where this funding actually gets distributed. A communications team, specifically with cultural brokers, so that we can promote this opportunity in underserved and remote communities and make sure that the communities that don't always have access to funding opportunities like this know about it and get the support and assistance that they need to apply. And then finally, Boulder County staff that are assigned to oversee the project from end to end. So we need your help. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to our childcare team. Jorge.
Good evening. My name is Jorge Gonzalez Soria, pronouns he, him, his. I am the housing coordinator at SPAN, Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence, and I'm going to introduce our second recommendation, which is direct cash assistance to families with young children aged 0 to 3 to help with childcare expenses. Quality childcare is a basic need for all families. It helps parents re-enter the workforce and promotes healthy child development. But quality childcare is really expensive and hard to access for many lower income families. Prior to the pandemic, the cost for childcare in Colorado was the 7th most expensive in the country. And in Boulder county child care costs were 5–10% higher than the state average. During the pandemic, costs have risen and affordable childcare continues to be a critical need for lower income families. The Economic Challenges Childcare Direct Assistance Proposal requests $6 million to provide direct cash assistance to families who are low income with children ages 0 to 3. This is modeled after the federal child tax credit, which proved to be effective in decreasing childhood poverty, reducing food insecurity, and allowing families to re-enter the workforce and access basic needs like childcare. Families would not have to spend the money in any specific way. Instead, caregivers could choose the best way it could support their needs. For example, it could help to pay for childcare or help a parent stay at home with their infant to provide care. And on this slide, you can see some of our expected impacts. Next slide, please. A more equitable recovery builds the foundation for more inclusive economic growth in the future. We will be focused on serving low-income families with small children who have struggled to pay for childcare or other basic needs. Priority will be given to those living in poverty who are ineligible for other childcare assistance like CCAP, who are single parents, households with a presence of disability. While all low-income families in Boulder County experience higher financial difficulty associated with COVID-19, BIPOC and Latinx households were disproportionately impacted. Pre-pandemic gaps in income, education, employment, and ability to afford quality childcare grew. This is especially true for many immigrant households that aren't eligible for a range of federal and state benefits, including general basic needs support, and childcare funding. This program would seek to include these families. By narrowing the disparity in poverty, employment, and early education rates, this program will also help to address systemic factors and inequities among Black and Latinx families. And next, Julie will share some of the details of the program.
Thanks, Jorge. Hi, I'm Julie Van Domlin with the Emergency Family Assistance Association, better known as EFA. Of the $6 million that Jorge mentioned, the program would direct most of the resource into transfers to families, $300 per month for 725 children over 2 years of implementation. We'd also fund a county staff position to help with program administration and evaluation, as well as provide implementation funding to key program partners. To successfully implement this program and reach eligible families, we would ensure to engage organizations that already have the trust and developed relationships with the target populations. These include Boulder County's family resource centers like EFA Sister Carmen and the Hour Center, our domestic violence shelters, and other cultural broker organizations in the community. The FRCs also have the experience of processing financial assistance, and we could leverage this installed capacity. In developing our own guaranteed income program in Boulder County, we can pull from best practices and lessons learned. Next. Some of this best practice includes consideration of potential cliff effects, or making sure that the direct assistance will not negatively affect family eligibility for other public assistance programs, like public housing, SNAP, Medicaid. Also, a cash plus model is most effective, which combines cash transfers with wraparound services and referrals to the broad range of basic needs and parental supports in our community. This would include, for example, support in identifying and signing up for childcare. It would also include linkages with other resources, food, financial assistance, family development work, referrals to other nonprofit service providers, as well as the county's home visitation programs, WIC, just to name a few. On the slide, you can see our estimated timeline. After 2 years of direct assistance, the program would not be able to continue without identifying funding. An impact evaluation will build the evidence base of the program, demonstrating impacts can secure and leverage funding from public, private, and nonprofit resources. With time to prepare, sustainable funding level of $3 million per year is easily attainable in our community. Next slide. So why is this exciting? The program will have meaningful, immediate impacts for families and children, often hardest hit by COVID, as well as our local economy. You can see on this slide a number of the anticipated short-term benefits. But what's more exciting is that even with this limited window of support, we can anticipate long-term effects. The two-generational approach will attempt to interrupt the intergenerational cycle of poverty. Investments made in young children have a lasting, lifelong effect. And this would reach a significant share of kids 0 to 3 in our county that are living in poverty. It will also begin to address racial inequality and economic and inequality in children's learning outcomes. The program will directly empower the most vulnerable families in Boulder County by giving them resources, control, and choice, an approach which has been proven in the US and over the world to be at the heart of long-term transformational change. So that's our proposal for direct cash assistance to families with children 0 to 3. I'm going to hand the presentation over to Debbie Pope, who will introduce our group's last and final proposal.
Great, thanks, Julie. I'm Debbie Pope. I'm the CEO for the YWCA Boulder County. I'm also the chair of the Women's Collaborative. Our third and final recommendation for consideration for ARPA funding tonight is the Early Childhood Community Village concept and collaboration. We're requesting $1.5 million in funding to grow capacity in the childcare and education system through development of an early childhood community village concept in Southeast Longmont. The funding will be used to support the design and development of a physical one-stop shop for early care and education needs, as well as 4 years of sustained training for family, friend, and neighbor care providers. Moving ahead to the next slide, let me talk a little bit about the village and our concept. This proposal is requesting capital funding and funding for operational support to develop an early childhood community village in Southeast Longmont to expand and support early childhood development in multiple aspects. The funding would be used as seed money to really support the design and the development of an early childhood community village concept, the village, focused on serving children from infancy to the age of 5. The village would bring together in one facility professional development and training opportunities for early care providers, especially family, friend, and neighbor caregivers, high quality and culturally, linguistically matched early childhood care and education. In addition, medical, social, emotional, language support for families and professionals, and finally, peer community support for providers and families. Research exploring the benefits and challenges of co-locating early care and education with other basic needs found that these models can increase equitable access to childcare in low-income neighborhoods and limited access to community assets. Additionally, providers found that co-locating can alleviate some of the financial and operational burdens linked to providing care in a new area so that they can increase holistic care approaches and serve more children. This project is based on the successful development of the Wilderness Early Learning Center in the city of Boulder, which beginning in 2010 brought together 8 nonprofit organizations serving children and families. Core partners of the Wilderness Center would be leveraged to help develop and implement this project. These partners include the TLC Learning Center, the Wild Plum Center, Early Head Start and Head Start, and Colorado Statewide Parent Coalition. Once opened, the community village would be able to serve hundreds of children and families each year through Head Start, Early Head Start, or TLC programs housed in the building. The training space could support community training and professional development opportunities, serving approximately 300 to 400 caregivers and providers per year. Lorena now is going to share more about the friend, family, and neighbor training and support. Lorena?
Good evening, and thank you so much for all of you for tuning in. My name is Lorena Garcia, and I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Statewide Parent Coalition. So through the sustained FFN training that will occur over 4 years, we will be able to provide 8 PASO trainings that are dedicated to training informal childcare providers in Boulder County that will train between 90 to 100 FFN providers each year, ultimately increasing the quality of care for families who use this form of care. This training can begin as early as January and will continue after the village is designed and developed. So why is this necessary, and what is FFN care? FFN providers receive limited, if any, resources and support compared to formal caregivers, and this was only exacerbated by the pandemic. Over the pandemic, significant decrease in formal childcare services occurred, causing FFN providers to fill the gap while also experiencing a decrease in income. Recent state and local feedback from FFN providers identified that they would like more access to information and resources to support caregiving, information and support, and to help children develop social and emotional skills. They also requested more peer-to-peer networking. In Colorado, 58% of FFN providers' household income has decreased. While state funding opportunities are becoming more available for early childcare centers, these resources are not available for unlicensed informal providers like FFN. Next slide, please. Now, this proposal will address the disparities across multiple sectors and populations. To start, the majority of kids 0 to 5, especially kids 0 to 2 in Boulder County, are being cared for by FFN providers. And these families are generally low-income families needing infant and toddler care, families with children with disabilities, families that speak languages other than English at home, families who work non-traditional hours. And by investing in FFN providers and the quality of FFN care, we will be supporting caretakers to re-enter the workforce. Now I'll pass it back to Debbie.
So this slide is showing the breakout for how the 1.5 million will be used to support this multifaceted project. And first, about 337,000 will be used to provide training to the FFN providers. And this could begin after an initial planning phase, likely in January of 2023. Training would be able to continue while building and development of the village is being completed. The development of the village is a public and private partnership, and the total startup cost for this one-stop shop is estimated at about $13 million. In addition to potential ARPA funding from the county, other public and private funding streams are being secured. Potential funders include the Stewart Family Foundation, UC Health, in partnership with executives partnering to invest in children, City of Longmont, and other private foundations. The land for the space would be purchased with funds from the 1.5 million. The exact timeline for opening the physical space, of course, depends on the remaining funding being secured. Once secured, though, the project would take about 24 to 36 months to open. And so we'd like to talk now a little bit about why this is so exciting. And there are many reasons why this is exciting for our community. The challenges that family and early childcare providers are facing today to ensure quality, affordable care for the infants and children in our community needs swift responses and innovative ideas for sustainable change. This is exciting because it's tackling this community crisis by bringing together our nonprofit, public, and private sectors to create a comprehensive, easy to navigate childcare and family support hub. Lorena, I know you share my excitement in creating the village too.
I do, and if you could advance to the next slide, please. So what's super as well as exciting about this investment is that by increasing the quality of care for children in FFN settings, we're increasing the trust that families have in their providers and in their choice of providers. We're increasing, as mentioned earlier, the public and private investment in partnerships for early childhood efforts. This is something that Boulder County can be proud of, setting the stage and leading the state in. We are able to expand equitable access to quality childcare services for families, no matter what setting they choose, whether it's licensed or informal care. One of the most exciting pieces is that this is a one-stop shop to improve access to public support services. This will eliminate the many doors that families and providers have to go to receive the support and services and technical assistance they need. And ultimately, all of this will improve economic growth and resilience by boosting parents' ability to enter and re-enter and remain in the workforce. Thank you so much for listening to our strategies. And now I would like to turn it over to the Affordable Housing Work Group.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Paul Janipour. I'm here today representing the Boulder County Department of Housing and Human Services. Along with my co-chair, Karen Garrity from the Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services Alliance and Commissioner Claire Levy, our commissioner sponsor, I'm honored to be introducing the project ideas from the Housing Affordability Working Group. Next slide, please. Our dedicated group of housing advocates and experts included community members, representatives from local nonprofit organizations, valued community partners, and local government collaborators. Our group also received support in subject matter expertise from county staff. We are grateful to everyone listed here on this slide for the contribution of their time, their thoughtful submission and discussion of ideas, their work on developing our proposal, and their enduring commitment to improve housing affordability in our community. Next slide, please. Our group will be presenting details on the 3 proposals listed here. Before I turn it over to my teammates for further details on each of these items, I want to draw your attention to the 3 bullet items listed below. These were the guiding principles of our work, and all ideas were considered with these principles in mind. Providing quick relief to community members who were most impacted by the pandemic, focusing on equity and measurably favorable outcomes for those who are facing racial, economic, and health disparities, and funding of community outreach, particularly by qualified cultural brokers, to develop meaningful and enduring connections to ensure equitable access. Now I will turn things over to Laura and Ann to take us through the details of our first proposed idea. Thanks.
Good evening. I am Laura Scheinbaum, and I'm here with Ann Tabb. I am the Director of Real Estate Development for Boulder Housing Partners. We are the housing authority for the city of Boulder. We're pleased to be representing on the pipeline projects, which is really trying to leverage work that has already happened in our county to develop affordable housing projects that will help stabilize housing for more individuals in our community that have been economically challenged by impacts from the COVID-19 time period. Next slide, please. So this is really a proposal to fund projects that are in pipeline, meaning projects that have already had resources allocated to them for development or pre-development work. So they've already largely been through an entitlement process, have land that is ready to be either built on or an asset that already exists for renovation work, so that we are really leveraging, again, work that has already been in process within the county. The thought here is to be able to leverage, to move quickly to get these projects over the finish line and begin getting them into the mix of affordable product in our communities. In any affordable project, there is always a gap. It's just fundamental to the way that affordable housing works. It costs X to build, whether you're doing private or public housing, and you get rents that are lower. And so in between those two numbers is what's called the gap. There's a number of ways that we solve for that. And there are things like tax credit equity, there's debt, there's local resources such as inclusionary housing funds. All of those resources have been strained during the pandemic. And so additional funds to help with a gap from the ARPA pool would be a great help to getting these projects over the finish line. And also the cost of projects is going up, as we've all experienced in the grocery store, at the pipeline, as our residents and those economically challenged in our community have experienced pipeline shortages, supply chain issues, labor issues, and just general instability in markets have created additional cost for these projects. And ARPA funding could help push us again over the finish line to get these projects starting to get built. So not only could they just help fund that gap, but the other way that they could assist is to really start to buy down rents on these projects. So the minimum rent for affordable housing, or I'm sorry, the maximum rent for an affordable housing project is 60% of area median income. For every sort of $25,000, we can start to buy down those rents for a unit to either 50, 40, 30% of area median income, which starts to get infinitely more affordable to those in our community that are most housing challenged. We are recommending that this come through an existing program at the county, which is the Worthy Cause competition. This is would be a set aside within Worthy Cause, so that we're not taking money away from other uses of Worthy Cause funds, but would be able to utilize and stand up this distribution by using an existing process. So that is sort of the overview and summary. Next slide, please. And really the goal, summarizing all of that very succinctly, is to just get more units into the community as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn this over to Anne, who's going to walk through some of the impacts that we see affordable housing having on those most economically challenged in the county.
Thanks, Laura. And good evening, commissioners. My name's Ann Tapp. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director at Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence. As we all know, the COVID pandemic has been tough on everyone, but it's been especially devastating for communities of color, for older members of our community, for survivors of domestic violence, for LGBTQI plus individuals, for people living with disabilities, among others. The lack of affordable housing creates insurmountable challenges to individuals and to families who are trying to rebuild their lives after COVID. This proposal to invest in the development of affordable housing pipeline projects is specifically intended to center equity and to reach those who've been underserved, marginalized, or left behind in our community. This slide from Boulder Housing Partners reflects that the residents of affordable housing represent a significantly greater percentage of racial and ethnic diversity than the greater population of Boulder County. And just to highlight a few data points, 95% of households are below 50% AMI, that's area median income. That would be a family of 4 with a 2-parent annual income of just over $58,000. Nearly 40% of BHP households are below 15% of the AMI. That would be a mom and her 2 kids living on $15,000 a year. For older adults and people living with a disability, these affordable housing programs are key to independence. Nearly half of senior households and more than 90% of households with a disability are below 15% AMI. Again, that's $15,000 a year. Similar data from Boulder County Housing Authority further emphasizes how critical and urgently needed affordable housing is for underserved communities. We can go to the next slide, please. You see here of households served through Boulder County Housing Authority voucher programs just last year, 25% identified as Latinx, more than 3/4 were female identified heads of households, 30% were elderly, and nearly half of all the households served were providing a home for children. So the availability of affordable housing is an urgent community need if our recovery from COVID is to be equitable and transformational for our community. I'm going to pass it back to Laura to describe a few examples of pipeline projects. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Anne. Super helpful. So our pipeline steering group we're not making a recommendation for these projects in particular, but we did review a collective of projects that were submitted to the ARPA steering group that are in pipeline that could be eligible for this type of funding from the ARPA funds from the county. Willoughby Corner is one. It's a Boulder County Housing Authority project that is proposing 400 affordable homes in a great variety of product types, duplexes, townhomes, and then serving a generational families, different types of residents who are housing challenged would be eligible to live there. So Willoughby Corner is out in Lafayette, I believe, and would be, just an example of a project that could utilize these funds. Riley Flats, another example. This is a completely entitled project that's permit ready. That's 100 units of permanently affordable housing. This is in the city of Boulder, would have 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, and then a set aside for some individuals that would be in need of permanently supportive housing and exiting homelessness. There was an idea for a Longmont affordable assisted living property that would really target those residents who are in affordable housing now, but are aging and are in need of additional resources and support. And so it would be taking it to that next level for assisted care in an affordable setting. And then we also met with the mountain community groups, and really there's a great need for projects and funding to go into, especially rehab in the mountain communities. So the thought is that there could be a set aside within the worthy cause distribution methodology to really help those mountain communities with potentially some of their rehab needs that could be identified, as well as perhaps a set aside for the future when a pipeline project comes along for the mountain communities. So that is just, again, examples. This would go through a vetting process through what we're recommending, again, is the worthy cause application system, or process. In terms of evaluating how the project were to work, again, I think it's a good indicator of what would happen with the demographics in terms of what we see in other affordable communities in the county. But certainly we would be able to do an evaluation of, once the property is leased up and stabilized, who that property is really serving. And I think, again, it's just over and over again, when you have that asset that's in the community, it continues to work for the community. And housing, as we know, is just such a stabilizing factor in people's lives. So that's the pipeline recommendation, and I'll turn it over to the next group within the Affordable Housing Steering Committee. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners and others. Kurt Fernhauer, Director of Housing and Human Services for the City of Boulder. And I'm also representing as a member of the Regional Housing Partnership. So we have 3 areas that we would like to focus on to increase regional capacity within the county. And the first one really evolves around policy progress that's been made in many of our cities like Superior, Louisville, Lafayette, and Erie, where they have passed or are in the process of passing inclusionary housing. This is a policy approach which brings in financial resources to build affordable housing. However, none of these communities have the capacity or infrastructure to manage and oversee the compliance of affordable housing. So this slide here shows sort of the various aspects of an affordable housing program. The circles on the bottom are home ownership and a compliance program. And so the first component of this would be rental compliance. So as rental affordable units are created, some by private developers in the future, the compliance for this and the support of this would be done regionally. So each individual city would not have to have their own compliance departments, and there would be sort of economies of scale in doing this regionally. And there's also many funding sources that come into affordable housing. There's federal funds like HOME and CDBG, as well as local funds that will now be coming through inclusionary housing. And doing the reporting and oversight of these units will be important. You can go to the next slide. So the home ownership program, this is an existing program in the city of Boulder. And these are the various aspects of running a home ownership program. Currently, there's 800 home ownership affordable units in the city of Boulder. So this would be replicating this program throughout the county. So once units are in place, it's marketing and creating education for households that could qualify for such housing. It's qualifying the buyers. So when a home comes up for sale, there's a set of qualified buyers already set up to purchase and move into such a home. It's handling the purchase and resale process, and it's providing the ongoing compliance. It's ensuring that the homes are compliant with the covenants that are in place and that they remain affordable in perpetuity. Another aspect of this program, which can grow to any part of the county, is a program which has also been started here in purchasing existing market condominiums, bringing them up to current energy standards or minor renovations, and then reselling them at a lower price, an affordable price, to qualified buyers in this program. This is a way of using ARPA resources to create opportunities for home ownership throughout the county. Next slide. This graphic is a little bit busy, but it shows a lot of the areas where we're already working together on a regional basis. And there's different programs that run across the county. Some of these programs are run by the county, some are run by the city of Longmont, some are run by the city of Boulder. So the areas in pink are the areas that would be covered through this approach. And these are areas where we currently have gaps. The last area that I'll speak about is the eviction prevention and rental assistance. And I think you can go on to the next slide here. I'm sorry, can you go back one? The rental assistance program is currently partially funded in the county, and it's fully funded in the city of Boulder through a tax on landlords. This would replicate this program that's in place, but throughout the county, to provide legal assistance for anyone going through an eviction and immediate rental support as well. Also mediation services. And we have found that this drastically reduces evictions, and it creates sort of equal footing for tenants as they go through an eviction process. Lastly, I'll talk about the sustainability of these programs. So as these communities begin inclusionary housing, they're going to have new cash resources that will come from new developments. And these new resources would be able to sustain these programs after ARPA funds have expired. So if we can go to the last slide here. So this summarizes the financial component of ARPA over 2 years. So the under inclusionary housing, so that's the rental compliance of about 245,000 over 2 years, the ownership program of 225. And under the ownership, we also have a foreclosure prevention. So this is a revolving fund of $1.2 million that would be used to purchase any affordable homes that potentially go towards a foreclosure process and prevent that foreclosure from occurring, and allow the individuals to exit the home without a foreclosure on their record and maintain the affordability of that home for the next resident. There's also the eviction prevention would be $300,000 over 2 years for legal support and eviction prevention staff who work with the residents through this process. All of these come to almost 2.3 million over 2 years. And then for homes that I spoke about earlier, where we would purchase existing townhomes or condominiums at market and turn them into affordable units, the net cost per unit is about $95,000 per home. And I will end there and hand it over to our next presenter.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Arndt, and I'm the Built Environment Coordinator for Boulder County Public Health. Tonight, Michael Pierce, the project manager for the Colorado Coalition of Manufactured Homeowners and a member of the San Souci Cooperative, and I will walk you through the 3 manufactured housing strategies outlined on this slide. Those include the acquisition of mobile home parks by residents or their designees, major infrastructure improvement projects for resident-owned communities or privately owned communities, and home repair assistance for low-income residents residing in manufactured housing communities. We're recommending a reserve fund of $5 million to support grants or 0 or low interest loans to support these projects. The reason that these projects are so important, Michael's going to detail in the next slide, really relate to manufactured housing representing the largest source of unsubsidized affordable housing in the United States. And while many manufactured homeowners own their homes, they do not own the land underneath their homes. This bifurcated ownership model inherently creates instability, with park owners being able to raise rents and make it unaffordable for existing homeowners to stay both within their homes and within their communities. This proposal leverages already completed plans, research, and policy investments that have been supported by Boulder County, including goals and policies in the Boulder County Comprehensive Plan, details in the Regional Affordable Housing Plan for preserving existing affordable housing, and supports the financial viability of a law passed in 2020, the Residents' Opportunity to Purchase, which Boulder County and the City of Boulder endorsed and contributed to the drafting of. This unique funding source can serve as a catalyst for investment in Boulder County's manufactured housing communities and eliminate some of the financial barriers that have inhibited residents from being able to purchase their parks. Next slide for Mike, please.
So before we get into the proposal, let's look at who it'll impact. Who are manufactured homeowners? Perhaps the largest subgroup are seniors living on fixed incomes, followed by first and second generation Hispanic and other immigrant families, service and support sector workforce, independent small business and gig workers, artists, musicians, nonprofit, and other mission-driven people. Many of these groups were significantly impacted by COVID downturns and from losing jobs, from losing hours. A lot of folks had to stay home because of health concerns. And on top of this, their pay has not, through the recent years, been keeping up with the lot rent increases that they've been facing. And this has led to ever increasing housing instability within the mobile home park communities. Because of this, our three proposals seem to have a strong chance of helping anywhere from 300 to 1,200 households, depending on how the funds get distributed. Next slide, please. So the first proposal is for acquisitions. And for a little bit of background on this proposal, consider the goal of so many people, which is home ownership and how vital that is. Traditional home ownership provides stability, security, control over one's own home space, and an asset that you can build and leverage for future expenses. Manufactured home ownership is the closest thing that people come within the 40% lower income brackets. But because the land underneath is owned by someone else with conflicting interests, such as maximizing rents, we often instead see insecurity, instability, lack of control over one's home space, and unstable asset values. And so an ideal solution for this is to have a park purchased as a resident-owned community, what's typically called a ROC. But currently, the financing for ROCs is a loan-only financing, which leads to stable rents, but still at an unaffordable level. So there's a need to buy them down. Our proposal then is to provide financial support for acquisition that can be available at or near the time of purchase for residents and nonprofits aiming to form these resident-run communities. And to do so in such a way, if we can do this, then the likelihood of contributing to a successful purchase where residents can take advantage of the opportunity to purchase laws recently passed, and we can leverage additional funding that can ensure affordable access to the low-income residents that will provide stability, security, control, and equity that any homeowner traditionally seeks. Next slide, please. And on to you, Rachel.
Yes, again, my name is Rachel Arndt. One of the major challenges faced by manufactured housing communities is related to the historic lack of investment in deferred maintenance and infrastructure upgrades. This has left water and sewer systems in need of costly repairs and regularly impacts residents' access to palatable and reliable drinking water and wastewater service. The committee recommends investment in two areas: privately owned parks and resident or nonprofit owned. Each strategy could require affordability requirements as a condition of a low or no interest loan or infrastructure grant. This funding could also support private owners by removing the risk of project design costs via technical assistance grants or by making infrastructure public. For resident-owned communities or nonprofits, this infrastructure funding could fill a financial gap, as Mike was just saying, in terms of the loan financing for the parks, and support resident ownership through another means outside of just the acquisition. Next slide for Michael Pierce.
The third function for the fund would be to provide home repair and replacement assistance. So for a little bit of context on this, over half of the manufactured homes in the county were built before HUD implemented its 1976 codes, or not long after, when HUD codes were fairly minimal. And because of this lower code level, a lot of mobile homeowners are increasingly caught up short by increasingly stringent codes. They face increasing costs from a cascade of permitting requirements where to fix a little, they end up having to fix a lot. And on the means side, with the recent loss of work and hours and rents going up faster than incomes, they often have less disposable income to put into those repairs, typically leading to a destructive spiral of more and more deferred maintenance. So in other cases, homes are at the close to the end of their useful lives, where the futility of repairs, unaffordability of alternatives, and loss of equity effectively locks these homeowners into remaining in deteriorating homes. So by bridging the affordability gap, a repair assistance fund can help break the downward feedback loop and make repairs once again financially feasible. It can also provide a route out for homeowners of homes that are past the point of no return. And that concludes our presentation.
Excuse me, Michael, we've had a request, and Rachel, for your affiliation, and that of Rachel Arndt. Rachel is with the Boulder County Public Health. But Michael, I don't want to speak on your behalf. If you could provide your affiliation.
Sure, I'm a project manager for the Colorado Coalition of Manufactured Homeowners, and I'm also a president of the San Souci Cooperative, a resident-owned manufactured home park.
And Claire, I typed our affiliations in the chat so that folks could access those as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Michael. Commissioners, I'm Paul Janapur with Boulder County Housing and Human Services, and we just wanted to jump in here at the end of our presentation. I know we're running late, but we wanted to make sure that we captured a few of the ideas that our group had discussed that were not considered among our finalists, just to capture them for the future, for possible future consideration. So they're listed here. One, to identify shovel-ready or under construction market rate developments to target for potential affordable home ownership. Another would be for the hoteling for unhoused families with children, so the ability to provide short-term hoteling options. And then finally, to purchase multiplex buildings and convert those to permanent housing for those who don't qualify for traditional housing programs, and for that population to also provide supportive services. So thank you to all of our team members, and thank you to the commissioners and community for the time this evening. And I'll pass it along now to our third working group.
Hello, everybody. My name is Robin Bohannon. I'm with the Boulder County Community Services Department, and I co-chaired the working group on mental health and social resilience with Katrina Harms, who's with the Peak to Peak Human Services Alliance. Commissioner Matt Jones was our sponsor. Next slide, please. As with the other working groups, we were blessed with many, many people who represented community organizations, coalitions, the general public, people with lived experience. And I really want to thank them for their commitment to this process and engagement, as well as our county staff. And we also outreach to additional community partners who really supported our work. We could not have done it without them. So thank you all. Next slide, please. As you heard earlier, the phase 1 community engagement process brought lots of information to us, and we heard plenty around mental health and social resilience. And this slide just demonstrates just the highlight of what we heard, which really informed our decision-making and prioritization process. Next slide, please. What we also heard is that we really need to acknowledge the pain that COVID has brought with regard to mental health and social resilience, and really recognize the inequities. We heard that we need to question the current status of mental health service delivery and disrupt the narrative. ARPA provides an exciting opportunity to test new options while informing how best to use existing investments. And we will share with you many shovel-ready projects for the ARPA investments. Next slide, please. The ideas generated by the working group were plenty. I think we had 19. And again, those were informed by what we heard from the community. And mental health and social resilience means different things to different people, as well as what does access mean and equitable access. So we really had to dive deep to really understand all that might be on our menu of services. So we prioritized from this lengthy list. Next slide, please. The 3 prioritized projects, and you'll hear that one project has many projects as part of the large project, were Equitable Access, what we're calling as Open the Front Door, navigation resources, as well as a community mobile response that is not a part of a law enforcement response. Next slide, please. I'll show this slide twice, but we also want to recognize that all of the working group priorities really do form a new system of how we manage behavioral health, mental health, and social resilience in our community. So you'll see Katrina will review the 6 projects under Equitable Access, which was our #1 priority. You'll see the Behavioral Health Hub resource navigation that's really core and center in our projects. And then we'll talk about the mobile response models. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn this slide over to Kathy Partridge to talk about the community-wide navigation hub.
Hello, I'm Kathy Partridge. I use she or they pronouns, and I'm a member of Together Colorado, Boulder County, BV-CAN, and the Supporting Action for Mental Health in Longmont. But I'm here as a community person. I'm here as a family member with lived experience of the pain of not being able to get mental health care for loved ones. And due to the gaps in mental health services. I'm here also because of talking with other folks with LGBTQ family members like mine, folks with cultural and language barriers, and those with youth and suicidal thinking. And I want to begin just by saying how transformational this plan is to families like mine. So the first and the centerpiece of what we're proposing is a community-wide navigation hub. The COVID-19 pandemic has represented a collective trauma that has increased mental and behavioral health needs across the community. But the disparate impacts for priority population, such as youth, LGBTQ+ individuals, the Latinx community, and historically underserved mountain communities will be centered in our response. The behavioral health system is complex and difficult to access, leading to many in the community not receiving the right service to meet our needs at the right time and avert crisis. The community-wide navigation hub would create an accessible front door for community members through a team of navigators and collaboration with community connectors and trusted organizations. Next slide, please. This drawing shows what we're talking about as a community-wide navigation hub. You can see we want to make clear it's not a behavioral health hub is not a physical building or a central location for behavioral health services, but in reality, it's a coordinated entry to behavioral health services, a collection of processes and procedures to facilitate timely and closed loop referral that is anchored and supported through an IT platform. This is leveraging an existing pilot that has a tested roadmap for expanded implementation in order to serve those who experience the most barriers in figuring out how to get help. This is already underway here in Boulder County with an existing phase 1 or pilot working with the criminal justice agencies and referrals for those engaged in the criminal justice system. The plan is to expand access to the navigation hub to community partners, including behavioral health providers, schools and nonprofits, and especially an initial focus on training and navigation resources for those who are experiencing the most barriers to access. The goal is to make this fully accessible to the general public. Next slide, please. Now, there's a lot going on in this slide, and that's on purpose. We want to make a point here that in 2019, a study provided to Boulder County recommendations for a coordinated behavioral health center by the Omni Group laid out this plan. This is a well-developed model that we will leverage with the ARPA funds to take and implement much more rapidly than could have been done under previous timelines. You can see here the elements, come back to this slide later. There's a lot, a call number, will access to integrated clinical staffing and countywide early diversion efforts. We'll have, there's many ways it will interface. The staff is going to be identified to have deep expertise in the county's behavioral health system, to understand the treatment options and have relationships for referrals with providers. This will be housed and maintained within a technology platform and include up-to-date technical information about services available and capacity to take new clients. The universal referral tools, including release of information, will be built into the technology platform. On the right-hand side, we list the reasons why these factors are so very important. Next slide. The community-wide navigation hub leverages existing funding work. As I said, this system, platform, and trained users navigators are being developed now in the county. It addresses social determinants of health needs alongside behavioral health needs through comprehensive service referrals and the use of alternative treatment models such as healing arts and community care. The outreach and education to community members will ensure that the navigation services are well used and will target outreach to provide to the Latinx community and other disparately impacted populations. The project includes adding resource navigators, funding existing networks of community-based organizations, and cultural brokers. Next slide, please. Here we lay out how the $3 million proposed will be spent. And the most important thing on this slide I want to call your attention to is that this program will serve the entire community ultimately, because it would allow any community member to seek support and navigation to mental and behavioral supports for themselves or someone we care about. Thank you, and I'll turn this over to Katrina Harms to talk about equitable access.
Thank you, Kathy and commissioners, for the opportunity to be a part of this process. My name is Katrina Harms, and I work for the Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services Alliance, and I am the operations manager of the Nederland Food Pantry. As a longtime resident of Boulder County's mountain community, I've heard many times that services exist for the western part of the county, while the lack of infrastructure, broadband and transportation, capacity issues around finances and staffing means the services either cannot be offered or fail to reach the folks that they should. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of I'm speaking on access to the behavioral health services to address mental health and social resilience with the ARPA Front Door project proposal. The Equitable Access Front Door project proposes leveraging the county's existing nonprofit contracting processes to increase investments in community-based organizations and school-based programs by creating a request for proposals that prioritize agencies and projects serving disparately impacted populations and focusing on access. Focusing on equitable access would result in a more comprehensive front door behavioral health safety net model that expands innovative treatments, services, and supports for those experiencing mental health issues, social isolation, trauma, and stressors, that impact the daily quality of life. It would provide direct financial aid to help individuals overcome the financial limitations that create barriers to receiving the mental health services and emotional support they would benefit from. Equitable access would include community-based training to reduce the stigma and fear associated with mental health and provide infrastructure support that would be required to increase access for historically underserved communities. Next slide, please. Equitable access was the top priority during the ARPA Phase 1 community engagement process, and also rose to the top during our working group sessions around mental health. Underserved communities who would benefit from better access to social resilience and mental health services include mountain and rural communities, individuals with physical, developmental, and/or intellectual disabilities, older adults, youth and parents, LGBTQ+, Latinx, and the intersectionality between any of these.
Hey, Katrina, I'm going to interrupt, but I think we're a slide behind.
Sorry?
Are we on the right slide, Katrina?
No, we're way ahead.
Okay, sorry about that.
Let me think. Now, next slide. Yes, you're right. Equitable access was the top priority during the ARPA Phase 1, blah, 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 mountain and rural communities. Equitable access means different things for different gaps and needs. Stigma, cultural differences, mistrust of institutions, government for those who may lack documentation all result in a challenge to finding the right door to obtain mental health and social resilience supports. Inaccessibility of physical and virtual locations and service provisions that are not welcoming or culturally representative creates frustration and avoidance of the service. Those eligible for Medicaid, uninsured, underinsured, as well as challenges for providers who choose not to accept vouchers and insurance due to the administrative burden, cause confusion and limit access. Next slide. Actually, you need to go back a slide. We might have been missing a slide. Community-based support builds on an existing structure of the safety net where any door is the right door has been the framework, similar to the safety net that provides financial assistance, childcare, and housing assistance to those in need. An example would be food pantries as an entry point in rural communities to inform and information and access to services. An example of community-based support would be working with schools to expand services to provide whole family support and education on the importance of mental wellness and at-home or in-community wellness practices. Community-based agencies, community centers, libraries, place-based services, all would play an important role in the community-based front door. Boulder County's deep investment and belief in the importance and power of community-based organization provide an already existing process to give priority to new or existing programs relying on peers for design and implementation and grounded in the unique cultural, language, physical, geographical, and/or historical contexts of their communities. Community-based programs would ensure that access, physical and technical, and allowing space for culture, race, and identity are built into every aspect. Examples in Boulder County include Out Boulder County, El Centro Amistad, and Sister Carmen, who work with specific populations as resource and social resiliency specialists. Next slide. Direct assistance through vouchers and leveraging existing partnerships puts access to basic mental health services into underserved communities quickly and provides some immediate relief. Mental health vouchers are a tool that can increase access and has been utilized since the onset of repeat natural disasters that increase trauma and mental health needs post fires and the flood. A voucher program would need an extensive outreach process to the community and to the providers who have avoided vouchers because of the administrative burden. Next slide. Along with community-based programs, the integrated services model would mean partnering with underserved populations to best determine what front door would work best and could be a transformational program for traditionally underserved populations, such as mountain and rural communities. An integrated service model uses prevention and outreach strategies that promote mental wellness, stress relief, mindfulness, communication, and community connectedness to focus on community without barriers to access. Boulder County has a successful integrated services model in their partnership with mental health partners and community healthcare clinics that serve thousands of residents and will continue as core partners in our work moving forward. Next slide. Lastly, building on a 2021 pilot program of community-based trainings in mental health first aid and suicide prevention will help strengthen the safety net. It would increase understanding and awareness of mental health issues while reducing the fear and stigma around mental stress, anxiety, trauma, and despair that has grown during the pandemic and continues to be unacknowledged and invisible. The trainings would be required to take into consideration the population attending, giving the trainers the capacity to make adjustments specific to their audiences and ensure that all definitions of equitable access are addressed. Next slide. Thank you. ARPA funding can provide seed funding to pilot these new ideas and make existing programs accessible, create shovel-ready projects for continued state and federal funding that align with creating a comprehensive safety net and front door structure for delivery of mental health and social resilience supports. This table shows the programs I just outlined with their cost estimates and proposed budgets along with the numbers served. And I'll now turn it over to Marcy to talk about the community mobile response teams.
Thank you, Katrina. Good evening. My name is Marcy Campbell and I use she, her pronouns. I work for Boulder County as the Behavioral Health System Project Manager and was one of the staff supporting the Mental Health and Social Resilience Work Group. The third recommendation is community mobile response teams. The work group heard clearly the need for community crisis response not linked to law enforcement. A person shouldn't need to go through the criminal justice system to get necessary mental and behavioral health supports. The group recognized the trauma that can come with a law enforcement response, particularly for community members of color or undocumented community members who may be hesitant to call for help if they know law enforcement will be present. This project proposes the establishment of mobile behavioral health response teams that respond to community behavioral health needs, resolving issues locally and without the need for law enforcement involvement. Teams would be dispatched through the state's 988 crisis line, which begins this summer and could be activated through the county's hub navigation system that Kathy shared about, should that proposal move forward. The intent is to provide this service countywide. Responders would be licensed professionals with extensive clinical and crisis intervention experience. This project will seek to address culture and equity needs by hiring BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and people of color staff, those who are Spanish speaking and who come from the communities in which they will work. Referrals, as requested, will be made to both traditional service providers and those reflective of the cultural traditions of those served. On the next slide, we'll see the funding and logistics. The total funding request for community mobile response teams would be $3 million. The first year would serve as a pilot with an estimated $750,000 budget. Future years, including full staffing, are estimated to run closer to $1 million per year. The slide also breaks down the budget by staffing, administrative support, evaluation support to determine how this process is serving the community, and other items to help with operating the program. It is not clear how many people would request access to this service, since this would be a new intervention. Call volume for traditional co-responders could be examined for cases that may not have required law enforcement participation to get a general sense. However, call load will depend on community demand for the service and the capacity based on the number of responders. If selected, it will be important to scale the response over time. The work group felt strongly that a 24-hour county-wide response would be needed as the program grows. And now I'll turn it back over to Robin.
Thank you, Marcy and Kathy and Katrina. So you've seen this slide before, and as you heard, we entertained lots of projects, wanting to find a good balance between some shovel-ready projects, as well as ones that would take more continued planning. I think it's important to recognize the workforce shortage that we are experiencing across all sectors, and we would want to make sure that we would stay engaged in some of the solutions that are being examined to attend to the workforce shortage, both at the state level as well as the local level. In closing, many of our projects need continued planning and community engagement. And we want to make sure those projects that are engaging our nonprofit partners, people with lived experience, and new partners come to the table to help us figure out the best implementation going forward. And with that, thank you for your time. Katrina, I apologize for interrupting you, and I look forward to the discussion.
I'm just going to take the last 10 seconds to sincerely thank all of the working group members who volunteered their time and their expertise and really brought their whole selves to this process. Just wanted to give you a big shout out and thank you. And then also to the county staff who have been just incredible partners throughout this entire process, who've met with us every week, who became part of the steering committee, and we really, just want to recognize all the work that you put into this process as well. Also want to thank the interpreters who have been with us through the working group process and also tonight. And a special thanks to the Community Foundation for their support and also for the Urban Institute for their guidance. We'll now open it up for questions from the BOCC.
Great, thank you everybody for all the work, for being here this afternoon into the evening, for sharing your expertises, and certainly for bringing recommendations forward to the board. So I am a couple pieces, and I just want to, typically in this process, what we would do is have the commissioners respond with some questions and then move into the public comment space. Because of the timing, I would suggest that we move this right to the public comment area. And so that's what we're going to do here. So what I want to do is just give some direction for the public hearing section for folks who are wanting to participate. And let me get back to my other page. So I've got that. If you are on the computer and you want to participate and you haven't been put on the list of names yet, you can type in your first and last name, and then we can get you moved to a panelist so that you can be a speaker. Speakers have 3 minutes to talk, share your ideas, ask your questions or solutions. And if anybody would like to join on the phone and didn't get that number earlier, it's on the screen now, but it's also 1-833-568-8864. And just a reminder, if you are on the phone wanting to be added to the list, and when you're ready, hit *9 to raise your hand and you'll be recognized. And again, staff will help you get added to the list. And then when you're ready, just hit *6 to unmute yourself. So thank you for being here, for participating. And I will go down the list. There is a timer on the bottom right-hand corner of screens, and you'll hear it actually ring. And then I'll have to cut you off just so that we can keep moving on the list if that's necessary. So then we will move forward. And number 1 on our list is Julie Pillar.
Hi, this is Julie, and I just want to thank everybody for the process. I don't need to comment though tonight. I was reserving the right in case anything needed to be addressed, but I'll just pass to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to number 2, Suzanne Crawford. And Suzanne, if you're on your phone by chance, hit *9, please. Oh, I see a note here. So we'll remove Suzanne and go to number 3, Jennifer Banyan.
Hi, Chair Lochamin. This is Brianna Barber, Assistant Clerk to the Board. At this time, I'm not seeing Jennifer in our attendee list, so I'm promoting John Lovell to be the next speaker. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we'll leave Jennifer on there and do another call before we close out our public comment, just in case they decide to call in and participate. Thank you. So we're moving to number 4, John Lovell.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I'm curious on some of these proposals, how the funding will go after the timing, especially given I understood there was some time restrictions in terms of the use of the ARPA funds. So I'm curious if I'm misunderstanding the time limitations on the expenditure of these funds, as well as the sustainability once the ARPA funds are extinguished.
Thank you. We'll move to number 5 on the list. And just a reminder that commissioners will respond to the questions. We just want to make sure we get through as many folks as we can before it gets too late. So we'll move to number 5, Dennis Whelan.
Hi, this is Dennis Whelan. I had signed up just to reserve my right to make comment if I saw something specific. I don't. I chair the Peak to Peak Housing and Human Services Alliance and the Nederland Food Pantry Board of Directors, and I'm very pleased to see that there is consideration for the mountain communities in much of this presentations. Beyond that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. We'll move to number 6, Eddie Erkin.
Hello, Chair Lochamin. This is Brianna Barber, Assistant Clerk to the Board. At this time, I'm not seeing Eddie in our attendee list, so if we could move on to Rhonda.
Thank you. Number 7, Rhonda Dwyer, you're up next.
Hi there, am I on speaker or no?
Yes.
I've been listening and I apologize. I didn't have a question. I don't know if one came through and if I was supposed to present.
I just wanted to check in and ask for your name, if you don't mind.
Of course, Rhonda Dwyer, and I am a program manager with Boulder County contractor, but I've been with the county for over a year, working exclusively on the ARPA project and quietly listening and participating as much as everybody else. But if there's a question for me, I'm happy to respond.
Great, thank you. What I will, and I'm sorry, I just didn't see the screen, so I couldn't tell who was speaking. That was why I was asking. If you want to stay on as an attendee, Rhonda, and then respond to any specific ARPA questions, that might be helpful for the working groups for you to stay on, and we can move you to panelist if you need to speak. Does that work?
Absolutely, I'm happy to. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move to number 8, Scott Cook.
And this is Brianna Barber again, Assistant Clerk to the Board. I just want to make a technical note that when we promote people to panelist, they will need to agree to a pop-up screen that shows up on their computer. So currently we are working to promote Scott, and I think we can move forward to our next speaker, Chris, please.
Thank you, and we'll come back to Scott then. Number 9, it's Chris Current. Do we have Chris on the computer or on the phone?
Hi, Chair Lochamin. This is Brianna Barber, Assistant Clerk to the Board. I do see that Chris is logged in, I believe, on a computer. And while we're trying to promote them, I think we could move forward to, one moment, please.
I'm looking number 10, Jennifer Ock.
Yes, I don't believe Jennifer is present.
Okay.
And it looks like Christina is no longer present. I'm not showing Duke in the attendee list.
So
Barbara.
We may want to just keep those folks open, and then we can do one last call as we move forward. That looks great, thank you.
Of course. And then I believe sorry, we do have a few more people missing. If we could move to Marty Moore, I'll promote them to panelists. I believe that's the next attendee present.
Okay, so we're at number 15, Marty Moore. And if you want to just unmute yourself, I can see the computer.
Oh my God, I've been talking this whole time. Sorry to waste your time.
No.
I actually just sent a text saying, or a message saying, thank you all for all your participation and the time it took to get to this. I really appreciate it. I have one question, I guess. Thanks for calling out the program that Out Boulder has called The Point, which is in partnership with the county right now. The question I have is, we've never received a voucher. It sounds like a problem. And I would like some more information on what that looks like. We have a great plan in place right now with the county that reimburses us quickly for the work we're doing in getting people placed into therapy. But the voucher program frightens me a little bit. And on that, I will stop.
Okay, thank you. And just a reminder as we go through our speaker list that commissioners will respond, and then if we don't have the answers, we'll have working group folks respond to the questions just to make sure that the recommendations are clear and everybody has an opportunity to get their input. So thank you. Let's move to number 16, Keir Harrington.
Pardon my interruption, Chair Lochamin. This is Brianna Barber, Assistant Clerk to the Board. Based on who is in our attendee list, I think we would be able to move forward to Marisa, number 19, please.
Okay, thank you. And we'll do a last call for folks. So if anybody's texting and or connecting with some of the folks that were wanting to speak, let them know that we are now in public comment period. Since we ran over time, that may be some of the confusion. Thank you everybody for your patience. We'll move to number 19, Marisa Bailon Yijian.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much for this. It's been amazing watching all the work go through. I was actually a part of one of the working groups with the child care group. But my question was for the final presentation on the final proposal having to do with the community resources as opposed to law enforcement addressing calls, and how the community will become aware, because I do strongly believe that this is a great proposal, but the success is only going to be as great as its outreach and the community awareness of this new resource.
Thank you. We'll move next to number 20, Carrie Inoshita. Where is it? Inoshita? I apologize. And Carrie, I can see the computer now, but if you can unmute if you're ready. Carrie, I can see your screen, but it looks like you're still muted. Brianna, are you in any communication with Carrie?
This is Brianna Barber, Assistant Clerk to the Board. At this time, we are unable to promote Carrie to a panelist. She may be saying no to the pop-up on the screen. So I think we could move on to the next available speaker present, which is Rosemary Thompson. And in just a moment, I'll promote them to panelist.
Okay, thank you. And just a reminder, if there's folks who are having technical issues and you prefer to use your phone, you're welcome to. That number is 833-568-8864. And you'll just have to you'll have to hit *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself when you're ready. And then we're moving to number 25, Rosemary Thompson. And after Rosemary speaks, we will go back to the list of folks who haven't spoke yet.
Hi, my name is Rosemary Thompson.
Hello.
Hello, my name is Rosemary Thompson, and I'm the program manager for the Personal Investment Enterprise Program at Mile High United Way. The PI program is within Mile High United Way's community priority of creating economic opportunity for all, ensuring people can meet their basic needs and have opportunities to move toward economic success. PI is a partnership, as you know, between Boulder County Community Action Programs and United Way. Many on this call will know someone who has been affected by the services of the PI program and will know that,
Rosemary, excuse me. Can you slow down just a little bit? We have American Sign Language and Spanish language interpreters helping you. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Many on this call will know someone who has been affected by the services of the PI program and will know the difference that it has made in the community since 2001. It is only thanks to partnerships and continued investment in PI from community funders, referral agencies, banking institutions, community educators, community volunteers, and staff members that PI remains a strong entity today. We are proud to continue to be present in Boulder and Broomfield counties. To date, over 400 individuals and families have been successful in purchasing their first home, starting and capitalizing their small business, or pursuing post-secondary education. As I have reflected on the requirements of ARPA funding and the focus areas that are needed, I see a clear connection to the PI program as a partner in meeting your goals of putting ARPA funding to work in our communities. Overcoming economic challenges is what PI was created for, to move beyond the barriers that individuals and families face to pursuing a more stable economic future for the next generation. We help individuals think about their finances and put saving into practice. This results in a path forward toward homeownership, business ownership, or a post-secondary degree. This creates a way for people to focus on the future rather than only paying the bills this month. Housing affordability is such a high priority and need today. We have seen the percentage of participants saving for homeownership go from 29% in 2011 to 63% in 2021. Behavioral health is also a key factor in our understanding of the whole person. Behavioral economics, the psychological, cognitive, emotional, cultural, and social factors that affect our economic decisions have taught us the importance of understanding the whole person as we work together to achieve their goals. PI's work in the community is proven and long-standing. PI has experience with managing federal grants. It has a structure in place to help people quickly toward their goals. It reaches those that are often not seen and whose needs may not be met otherwise. Without community support, PI would not have an 86% success rate in the program. 80% of participants earn less than 50% of the area median income, while 53% of participants identify as Black, Asian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic, mixed race, or other. Thank you so much for your continued support of PI. We are incredibly grateful for your investment in promoting financial stability, economic mobility, and permanent generational change in our community that has a ripple effect in our greater economy.
Thank you, Rosemary. And then we'll go to number 26, Marta Kern.
Hi, folks. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much. And it's so exciting to hear all of the recommendations, really extraordinary. I'm with Eco Arts Connections. We bring the arts together with science, social justice, indigenous, and other ways of knowing to inspire people to live more sustainably. And that's environmentally, economically, socially, culturally, personally. We do lots of work with mobile home communities, especially Latinx folks, and we're thrilled to see the opportunities we hope we're going to be available to the folks we work with. One thing I wanted to ask is another part of my identity, and I'm going to read from the ARPA community engagement part on the website where it says, when asked, what's one thing Boulder County can do to improve the lives of you, your loved ones, or your business, end quote. An overwhelming number of respondents suggested increased and improved affordable housing options, check. The other top suggestions include economic support to offset the impacts of the pandemic, check. Improved mental health services, check. Including initiatives to combat social isolation from the digital divide, check. Increasing affordable childcare options, check. And greater support for the arts and artists. I'm just curious about this last part about the arts and artists, and it was wonderful to see those words even in the plans, but I'm curious, will they also be part of all the other different recommendations, or is that you need help with? Because I know lots of folks that I'm sure would love to help. Thanks so much again for all your work.
Thank you. So I am going to do an additional call out for anybody who is wanting to join in the public comment this evening on our hearing on ARPA final recommendations. The phone number to do that is 833-568-8864. If you are on the computer as an attendee and would like to speak, please put your name in the chat so that we can move you to a panelist. There are some instructions in the chat, but if you are moved to a panelist, we need your help to accept being a panelist on the pop-up on your screen, and then you'll be able to unmute and turn on your video. And if you would like to speak, you can also raise your hand in the Zoom or again, enter your information into this chat. So that's kind of the last call for any additional speakers. And then what we're going to do is go back to our list where we had missed some folks. They may be back on the computer or back on the phone now. And so we're going to go to number 3, Jennifer Banyan. And I'm going to read a few names just in case somebody's not looking at the screen as who's in order. We're going to go to Jennifer, then Eddie Erkin, then Scott Cook. So those are our next speakers if folks are still interested. And just a reminder that commissioners will respond to the questions, comments that we have heard, and we may have staff support if there's something we don't know or have some other comments about as well before the commissioners respond in general to the presentations, the recommendations. Again, this hearing this evening is not a decision-making hearing, it's an informational, and that's why we are here with the support of Boulder County staff behind the scenes to open up this public hearing to hear the information with all of you at the same time. Is Jennifer still able to join in for public comment? No?
Jennifer's not present this evening.
Okay, thanks for that help. Is Eddie Erkin? We'll go ahead and take Jennifer off the list. Eddie Erkin?
Hello, Chameen. This is Brianna Barber, Assistant Clerk to the Board. I have gone through the list of all the people highlighted, and the only ones present are Scott Cook and Carrie Inoshita. And I've tried to promote them both to panelists a few times. So, and they're not coming over to the panelist side. So just wanted to give you that update.
Great, thank you. So if, and then of course I just, Scott and Carrie, if either of you are there and want to just put a note into the chat if you would still like to speak, and or the phone number if you're having tech issues and do want to speak, please go ahead and call in at 833-568-8864. And we all understand the challenges with technology and devices, so we'll extend our grace as well. And Brianna, I just want to check in with you to make sure that from that last call out to folks, there's nobody else that has added their name to the list.
Brianna Barber, Assistant Clerk to the Board. Yes, Chair Lochamin, that's correct. I haven't had anybody else add their name to the speaker list.
Okay.
Thank you for checking.
Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment section. Thank you, everybody who is participating with us this evening. We have also, just want to add in throughout this process, we have received emails from a lot of different folks around the community, not just folks working on the working groups, and we've read those, and those have been compiled and provided as information into this process, both in phase 1 and phase 2 as well. So that's been another opportunity for folks to provide public comment. So with that, commissioners would just love to open up the conversation to respond to public comment and any other questions that you might have or comments. And I think probably the best way to do this is respond to the comments, and then we could go through the recommendations by group and talk about them together. And we can start there.
I had thought perhaps we would just make comments, not walk through the whole thing, since it's been described fairly well.
We will, this is our public hearing. This is our opportunity to hear from the speakers. And also, if there are any clarifying questions, I would encourage commissioners to do that here in a public forum and make sure that if there's anything we missed, that we'll have an opportunity to ask that. Do you have comments? Do you want to just respond to the public comment first, Commissioner Jones?
Well, I have to put everything in context, so I'll just say what I need to say. First of all, it's really impressive, all the work that's been done by these groups and by the work by staff and others to lead up to this work. And it was interesting hearing it all in one batch. We got the summary of all of this previously, and I went through, and it's a lot of exciting work, and it's a really a big opportunity for the county and for the people who live in the county. After all, that's what this is all about. To Mr. Lovell's comment about how long this lasts, he's correct. These are ARPA funds. They're allocated for 4 years. We're more than half a year into that, so we're approaching 3 years. And then they go away, and unless we find federal funding or something like that, the chance of them continuing is small, if at all. And sustainability and the criteria, I think, meant two things. One is trying to have a program that lasts beyond its time so that it continues, but it's also helping people who've been really adversely affected by the pandemic now, and kind of more like a stabilization issue, because it's still going on. The pandemic exacerbated a lot of issues we had. I worked in the mental health and social resilience group, and those issues existed before the pandemic. They just became more profound for people. So there's that. And the other part is, and we got into this a little bit, the executive summary, which will be posted, is great, because each one of these was allocated approximately 15 million, and that's what they came in at, which I'm glad that people on the work groups went to the extent to figure that out, so that it helps us make decisions. And some of these things are ready to go right away. Some are going to take some time to stand up. And so that's kind of the timing of this. And in the mental health group, we kind of built on programs that are already there, and we're going to expand them and grow them. But it is a limited amount of money, and 50 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is to me. But you divide that by 4 years and you compare it to our budget, it's, you know, it's what, 8%, 7% of the budget, the county budget. So that's just the realism. But on the other hand, people have done some real good work in these work groups to figure out where can we get the best result for the money we have to try to transform some of the problems that were exacerbated by the pandemic. So Mr. Lovell is correct. This is a 4-year program. It is for everybody. Congress said it that way. And also to Marty's comment, the idea was to expand mental health services, Marty, and we can talk to you about that because with the direct payments to help people and leverage all the great nonprofits we have in this county. It's just a long tradition of strong nonprofits helping people and the county working with them, and we just want to take that to another level. So those are 2 questions that I had written down here that I tried to address.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Levy?
Yeah, thanks. I was not going to try to respond to the questions, and Commissioner Jones did a nice job anyway. Excuse me, of doing that. I had just some questions about the proposals, and I thought maybe now was a good time to just ask those questions. I don't think we want to bring people back to answer them necessarily, but because I think there'd be a lot of kind of back and forth here. But I thought it might be good because we do have the public who's been very interested in this project to just put those, at least my questions, out there so they know, you know, what my thinking is. But before I do that, I guess first I just want to, again, you know, pile on with all the thanks that everybody has already provided for the people who have dedicated their time to this process that we've set up here, thanks to funding from the Community Foundation that enabled us to retain Rebuild by Design and follow through on our commitment to robust community outreach and to investing the funds where the community told us they wanted them invested based on their experience of this catastrophic pandemic. And so what we're seeing here is the result of really an amazing process that has been organic from the ground up. And now it kind of comes down to us to make the decisions. And I think we've got really incredibly strong proposals and very interesting proposals. I'll just go through the notes that I jotted down, you know, just to share, you know, just some of the questions and that I have. So on economic challenges and the small business and the surviving and thriving proposal on the small business and nonprofit funding. I guess one thing, I don't know how we deal with this, but you know, what we have now are the small businesses and the nonprofits that made it, that didn't go under. And I think there are a fair number that didn't make it. And I don't know whether it's possible to find out you know, what kinds of economic challenges they are facing as a result of having lost their business, and whether there's any kind of support that can be provided. I believe it may have been John Taylor, it may have actually been Paul Weissman, our treasurer, who mentioned some of these small businesses that have liens now against them for unpaid property tax or personal property tax business personal property tax that may need some assistance. So we might want to find out about that as well, because the ones we're helping here are the ones that actually were able to hang on and make it through. The timeline of that, of not being of really needing, I think until it was mid 2023 to be in a position of putting those funds out in the community. I am concerned, you know, if these are organizations that are having trouble hanging on, we're basically saying hang on another year. and I wonder if there's a way to speed that up. I think making grants, a whole new grant program, is a really challenging thing to come up with the criteria and the process, and then accountability for that. So it's just a note of caution. So I think of all the projects and proposals, that was the one I think I had the most concern about whether we'll really be able to stand it up. The direct cash assistance, it just makes me happy to know that this is part of our proposals. It's something that when we first heard about these ARPA funds, I wanted to be sure that we considered this very seriously. I think it's one of the most powerful things that we can do for people. And the only questions I have about that are two, I guess. One, whether we can consider by maybe adjusting some funds that from one bucket to another, going slightly higher than 100% of the federal poverty level, because that FPL is a very low amount. And there are families, many of whom have children in that 0 to 3 age category, who are probably facing pretty severe financial constraints or challenges that, you know, are above that 150% of federal poverty. And so I'd love for us to consider going up slightly higher. And then I also wonder about, you know, 0 to 3, I get it, that's the most expensive childcare to be able to afford, but you can't really rely on public schools, even with the preschool program now that's funded, until your kids are ready for kindergarten. So that's a program I guess I'd love to see us consider, a higher income level and possibly including 0 to 4 in age on the early childhood village. I think on that, I think I want to make sure I actually understand what we're doing here. That's primarily to support FFN providers, I believe. And I'm wondering whether we actually need to build a building to do that, whether they could co-locate, this project could co-locate, because that's so expensive. I think I heard the figure of $13 million from some other source that would be needed for that. Or that might be just in the materials. And whether you know, I'm wanting to make sure we're using as many of these funds as possible for services that's much more immediate than the all that's entailed in developing a building. So that's one thing. And then also whether there's whether there are forms of just direct assistance to FFN providers that might be helpful. I think that the training and everything that's proposed is helpful, but there these are some of the most affordable childcare providers who probably are struggling quite a bit with the fact that they can't charge very much for childcare, and just whether we should also consider some form of direct assistance in addition to this early childhood village. I'm just going to keep moving along just so.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So I was the board the county commissioner liaison for housing affordability. I think I am pretty well versed on that, and I think we've come up with some great projects on the regional capacity sort of pot of projects and needs. The materials didn't include a number to allocate towards the home ownership program. And there was just a note saying that could come out of the pipeline set, but I think it would be helpful to develop a target amount for that so that we know, what we might be able to do with that proposal. And that's the proposal that would buy market rate condos or townhomes, fix them up, and sell them slightly below market for long-term affordable home ownership. So just thinking it might be good to actually put a number on that. I did want to make sure I understood that the foreclosure prevention funds are limited to preventing those homes in the affordable home ownership program from going into foreclosure. I didn't understand that at first. I thought we were trying to do a foreclosure prevention program that would be a little broader to that, and I would be worried about the administrative complexity of doing that. Manufactured housing, I think that whatever we can manage to do to support manufactured housing communities would be a benefit. I would want to make sure that if we're providing funds for infrastructure to non-resident owned communities, that we're very, very careful about making sure that those properties remain in manufactured housing, that they're not put up for sale for redevelopment. So we may want to get a commitment to a right of first refusal for any private for-profit owner that does accept these funds. And then on the funds to support the resident-owned community purchases, I think this is the thing that's so much needed to actually make this a reality, because limited time available to come up with financing, the high cost of financing, even if it's provided by ROC USA. And we saw the textbook case for this when Sans Souci went through that process. But so there's ample need. I think we could find ourselves with some funds available at the end of the period when we're supposed to expend these funds, because there are so many contingencies that would have to fall into place for additional communities to become resident owned. So this is just something to keep in mind, that if there aren't any manufactured home owners or managers right now that are interested in selling, and residents that are interested in becoming resident owned, those funds may not be usable for that purpose. But this is, we can put them into other things at the last minute because of these great pipeline projects. I think the last two comments, just two comments on the mental health and social isolation projects. What we've been hearing so much here over the last several years is the shortage of providers. And I may have missed it, but I didn't see anything to address that provider shortage. And so I'd be interested in understanding how, as we try to expand access, but we don't have the providers to serve that expanded access, whether we're going to be able to actually fulfill the promise here. So I'd like us to talk a little bit about opportunities to expand availability of providers. And then I'm a little bit confused, or I'm a lot confused about the voucher idea. I don't know if there is an existing voucher program and we're just going to provide additional funds for it, or whether this is a new concept. I'm not familiar with it. And just the questions I have are when, insurance companies negotiate with providers to cap rates, right? And when you get behavioral health services through Medicaid, Medicaid's done that negotiation. If you get it directly through mental health partners is assuring affordability. So if we're proposing a direct pay for people who don't have insurance and for some reason aren't eligible for Medicaid, are we going to be negotiating provider rates, or are we just going to pay their self-pay rate? So I just need a little more background on the voucher program, and that might be something easily answered by folks that propose that. So those are the questions I had. I think our staff and all the working group members were hoping kind of to get a thumbs up, down, or sideways on these, and I am not prepared to do that at this time. But I can say that I think we've really, I think we've got strong proposals, and I think we'll be able to put the funds that we've received to very good use. I want to say one more thing, I guess, because I know Jennifer Banyan wanted to be here, and I think she's out sick. Her passion is food insecurity, and I think if she did speak, she would be asking about whether there is a need to address food insecurity beyond what SNAP does and what our family resource centers are able to do through their food pantries and whatnot. So I did want to just acknowledge that early on in the pandemic, especially, was a huge problem, and maybe that didn't rise to the top here in our outreach efforts and in our other efforts to surface what the primary needs were in Boulder County. But I would like to hear from our SNAP administrators and maybe the Boulder County Public Health on hunger, nutrition, and food insecurity before we make final decisions. So that's all I have.
One question you had about the mental health, I can answer real quick here. You're right about the workforce availability and development issue. That rose to one of the top tier issues. It's systemic across all of these things that the county is thinking about doing. And it's recognized that that could be a significant issue. And because this is like a 3-year deal or 4 years, it's hard to work on the pipeline issues. So it's recognized as an issue and was recognized by the group as an issue that needs to be addressed if these things are going to be successful.
Well, maybe I could just then dialogue with you on that, Commissioner Jones. It was the thought that some of the ARPA funds would address that pipeline issue, or what? Because acknowledging it needs to be addressed and having a plan to address it, there's a big gap between those two.
Yes, so I didn't sit in on all the conversations, but it was discussed and how it could be managed through. But again, if you're developing a pipeline and you have 4 years and you need a 4-year degree or 2 years or some sort of education, it's not going to meet this need, but it's part of the conversation in a more holistic sense.
Okay, I may jump in then a couple pieces similarly, just to thank you to everybody who's put in the work to not only use the phase 1 community engagement process, but then make some decisions on how to narrow down those lists. A couple of the groups talked about the wider and broader lists of requests, and one of the speakers asked about sustainability, and I think that's also one of my concerns about, you know, this is one-time funding. And also the question Marisa brought up around the outreach and how that will be part of this implementation. And I think that might be the response also to Marta, who asked about artists and the art who were brought up in the initial phase 1. And so the working groups had the really difficult decision-making of, again, narrowing down from some of the identified needs in Boulder County and then choosing what would be recommended here today. So hopefully that at least responds to some of those questions as well. I have some questions too, and I'm really looking at the proposals and recommendations from the experience and going back to March 2020. And that's how I'm going to be really trying to place myself to ask some of these questions, to listen this evening, and also to make these decisions here in the next couple of weeks, to remember where we were as a community, where the stressors were, what we were hearing, what students were facing, what our aging adults were facing, etc. Because this is COVID-19 relief funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. And it's hard because now we're 2 years later and we've had other significant natural disasters in our community. And we have now issues with inflation, and we have a housing crisis that continues. And so I just want to encourage us all that the task is really to use the COVID-19 lens for these particular funds that are federally issued. And we have brought on an administrator, and we have added on as the county another $1 million worth of administrative funding to get us to the point where we are right now, just to go through this process and start distributing and looking at immediate needs since 2020. So with all of that, a couple of the questions, a few people talked about the hope that this funding would be transformative in our community. And so just starting with the Economic Challenges group, and I was a sponsor with that group and also was not able to do all the working group, but has been able to do the steering committee over the last several months. The recommendation, just a curiosity that the group can come back to us with, if there might be consideration for the small businesses. It says in that $7.5 million, the proposal shows 400 businesses at 10,000 per business. So understanding what this group is going to use as a definition for small business would be helpful. And then also, what would that look like if those tiered amounts, instead of the 10,000, 50,000, and 100,000 that are in there, how might a small business be impacted if it was to be moved up to 25,000 as an example? And then 20, so it would be 25,000, 50,000, and 100,000. So it's just a curiosity about, could that be more transformative depending on what the needs were and what this group was wanting to focus on. So that was my comment and question on that one. The other, direct cash assistance to families, it would be helpful if somebody has some of the information. I appreciated Commissioner Levy's comments on this one, and I think this is an exciting potential, similar to like just an income support, right, for childcare. And we've seen the needs, and we've seen in Boulder County even the reduction in childcare facilities due to COVID, and some of those who have just not been able to reopen. So the question would be, if the number was that we heard was $300 a month, and the narrative talks about up to 2 years of receiving that, if we know in Boulder County what the average gap in childcare, what the actual gap in need for childcare funding is. And I'm guessing that's where that $300 number came from, but I just was curious and also wanted to know if this group was looking at, well, I think that if I didn't get these mixed up group-wise, there was a few different ways to consider how to decide which residents and which sectors of the county might receive funding. So that would be the other piece of that. Community village. That one, my question was just if this is really a concept, how far along it is. It would be helpful to know. I appreciated the leveraging notation of folks who might be also participating. I interpreted that program as a site for teaching, for training, for actual kids to be on site, kiddos to be there learning. And I was curious about if there's been any allocation from City of Longmont, because the location looked like a Southeast Longmont from their ARPA funds. So that was a curiosity I had. Let's see here, housing affordability. I had a question on what was talked about in the presentation by Laura, and I didn't write down the last name, but one of the presenters talked about timeline on pipeline ready. And so I was just trying to understand also how would this ARPA fund, how would this respond to COVID-19 in the suggested group? So I was just wondering, it would be helpful to me, and I'm pointing to my notes here, that doesn't help anybody over there. For the different projects that were given as examples, how that group could potentially give a narrowed down recommendation that would either pull in census tract numbers, that would, like, how can this group ensure that this would reach the folks that they presented that it would, meaning they talked about communities of color, they talked about folks with disabilities, they talked about really specific groups, but I don't hear how they could ensure that one or any of these particular projects would meet that need. So that was just a question that I have that might be just what could be brought to us in the next conversation. And I think I may have already said that one, if there's an overlay with census tract that ARPA guidance provides. So that was the question I had on that one. Another initiative here on the Regional Housing Partnership, just curious about the other homeownership programs that exist and how many people they have on the ground, just thinking about the sustainability question. How many people would that really take to do that work? There was a couple pieces. One was talking about eviction prevention, and I know there's other programs that do that. So just wanting to check in around duplicative programming. And I wasn't sure if this, the way I heard it, this homeownership program would be taking in all of the different homeownership programs that already exist. The example was about the Boulder homeownership program, but Longmont has a homeownership program and as well. So I just wasn't sure if the intent was to truly bring all of those under into one organization. If it was conceptual or if it was really into a facility with bringing in all of those staff onto one location from around the region. And let's see here. Oh, I did have a question just about the feasibility, and I think our ARPA administrator has gone through all of these notes just to check off because this is federal funding, we do have to make sure that we are in line with not the initial guidelines, but the revised guidelines and where we are right now with the ARPA funds. So the question was the mobile home parks, and if, I don't know if Michael Pierce is still on, but Michael and I were both testifying on manufactured housing bill last night until midnight. So just want to appreciate all the work that he's doing on behalf of the sensitive community as well, and acknowledge that can we do a reserve fund? And I think it's similar to the question that Commissioner Levy had, is, you know, what happens if we don't have another mobile home park that can go through the process in time, and or it doesn't come up for sale within the timelines that we have with the 2024 or 2026 spending timeframe. So just want to make sure that we could actually do that one. I love the idea. I just don't know if these funds would be, if we could use them. Let's see here. The next one, the mental health and social resilience group just had some question on the community mobile response teams. If this would then replace what the county already has as a co-responder model, or if it would be, and I'm talking about long-term, if that would be part of the goal. And the reasoning why is we've heard in a separate presentation about nationwide a lot of interest from community members to move this co-responder model, really how this, the way I'm reading this mobile response team, to disconnect police officer and law enforcement from that work. And so I was just curious if this group was thinking long-term, or if this would be a setup of $1 million per year program in addition to the significant amount of funding and resource that is set up and being increased around the region already with the co-responder program. So that was one of the questions I had. And then just the question around what would that community engagement look like with this particular community mobile program. And I think somebody asked about that as well in the public comment, just how would people know about that particular program. The community-wide hub navigation, and I'm gonna have to see here. This one I just had some questions about for our Boulder County staff. I just wasn't clear if this was the current project that Boulder County has, because a hub has been presented to us and it looked like the same graphic. So I just wasn't sure what would be the transformational difference. And also, just as importantly, is what would be the long-term sustainable additions for what looked like another 6 FTEs. So that'll just be something that staff can explain. Let me see here. So I think that was, there was another one in the mental health program proposals, and I'm in the executive summary. I'm on the last page of the executive summary. I think it's page 13. Just wanting to know who else is doing some of these different types of programs that were notated in there. And that'll just be a bigger, that's kind of a general question. I think who else is doing this work? How would this be transformational? Are there metrics for addressing, a lot of folks were talking about racial equity and or specific sectors of community. So how will we know if we are successful? How will we know if we have responded to the community asks that have come up throughout this work, so that we can come back and hopefully do annual updates on where the funding's been used and how it's done something new and transformational in our communities as we continue the work over the next several years. So those were a couple of questions I had. So those are my questions, my response. Commissioner Jones, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say. Just a reminder for folks, and thank you so much for being patient. We didn't know for sure how many folks we'd have joining in public comment, and sometimes we have one person and sometimes we have 100 people. So we just never know. but we appreciate your patience. Again, we aren't making any decisions this evening. Just as a rule of update, we have May 11th, we have an additional meeting with the Boulder County directors. We have been meeting with the chairs, not the co-chair and chairs, but with the Boulder County staff who's been co-chairing these teams, and they've been updating us monthly in regards to the work that's been happening. And we have a meeting similar to that next week as an administrative meeting within the county to talk more. So commissioners, any other additional questions, items that you want to get out, just so that folks can send any other information to us from the chairs or co-chairs?
I don't have any questions. Well, I have questions, but I'm not going to go through the list right now. I'll learn from staff the background on them. But what really strikes me about this whole presentation and the whole effort is how hard and stubborn these challenges are. And I just want to thank our citizen experts that stepped up to help us make progress on some of them. This is a real opportunity, and I just want to appreciate you for doing that. And the times when I listened in on the Mental Health and Social Resilience Committee, these are passionate people that have devoted their lives, in most cases, to this kind of work. And I'm sure it's true in all these work groups. And it was a great conversation to listen into, trying to solve and address these issues that are so difficult. So I just want to thank them. That's my concluding comment.
Great.
Yep, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I don't have any other questions at this time. I think, when you actually are committing money to programs, we'll need a lot of detail so that we actually know how it's going to work. And that was what was behind a lot of the questions that I had. And throughout this process, there's sort of been a tension between wanting to do something brand new, never been done before, transformational, yet that means we may have to create a new structure to distribute the funds. And I think that we've got a really great mix of things that provide potentially game-changing opportunities, such as the direct cash assistance, no strings attached, and investments in tried and true, such as the housing pipeline projects. So, we'll have to figure out ultimately what the staff capacity is for new programs. The materials noted where we were going to need additional staff in order to do those programs. And there, I think what we're going to have to do is understand how much of these one-time resources do we want to actually have to use on new staff to administer programs versus being able to put as much directly out into the community as possible. So these are just the difficult questions I think we'll be wrestling with at the end. I see that we had another question about funding for the arts come in, or a comment. And I'm not going to try to read it and talk at the same time, but I do want to say to the person who's posing those questions that having a daughter and a future son-in-law who are in the performing arts, who both had no income during the pandemic until performing arts venues could reopen. I understand those challenges, and perhaps and hopefully some of the funds for nonprofit organizations can help performing arts organizations, because one of the COVID federal relief packages provided money for venues. So the Denver Center for the Performing Arts, the Dairy Center, the the Pepsi Center, whatever, big, venues, but the artists were left out of that. And so I am very sympathetic to that need, but that's all I have. I just want to thank everybody for their dedication and their help for us.
Great, thank you. And I'll just respond. I did read through while you were talking, Commissioner Levy, and that's that under that small business grant and nonprofit grant would be an opportunity for artists to connect there. So that would be great. Thank you everybody for the work, for the participation, for continuing to be patient. And I just want to note that in a couple of the proposals that had timelines, which is really helpful, it would be great to know before next week and the meetings with directors if there is an opportunity. I know some of those groups were talking with programs that already exist somewhere, whether it's with a enterprise fund or whether it's in a fund that already exists at the county, to move that timeline up a little bit. It would be really great to start getting some of this money out in 2022 and not have to wait to 2023. And I also understand that it's a process. So I just want to put that out there as a ask for folks to bring some information back when they do. So again, we aren't making a decision this afternoon. This is information and it's very appreciated. This video will be on the website, on the boco.org website or bouldercounty.org, along with all of the other information, the history of this work, the different federal guidelines and reports that are required there as recipients and as an organization that's accepting federal funding on the American Rescue Plan Act funding here in Boulder County. So thank you everyone so much. Staff, we appreciate you staying on this evening and making this public process happen. Thank you to Rebuild by Design for facilitating this process. Thank you to our administrator, Leslie Irwin, who's taken on the ARPA administration role for the county and is leading a team of staff in conjunction with this work. And certainly want to appreciate Community Foundation Boulder County, who came to us last spring with the ask about what would this look like if we included community engagement into this process. So thank you, everybody. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn our public hearing and appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph.